Hi there, this is Sean, the Honest Book Reviewer, with another book review. In this video, we're stepping into the horror genre as we discuss In the Dark, written by Richard Laymon. I have a copy of the book here. This is the copy from my bookshelves. I do have quite a number of his books on my shelves. I do plan to read all of them very soon and review each one. I think it'll be the last time that I do read each of these novels, because I just want to clear space on my shelves and remove the ones that I really don't want to read again. And I figure if I haven't read the books in 15-20 years, I don't know if I'll read them again after this. I have read all the ones on my shelves before, so there will be rereads. I don't recall all the details from them, so I don't know if I'll enjoy them as much now as I did back then, or I think I did back then. But let's get started with the first one, In the Dark by Richard Laymon. This novel starts with a really good hook, and it's the part of the novel that I remember the most from the previous read many years ago, and it's the part again in this reread that I found the most exciting. So our main character, Jane Carey, is a librarian, and I think in the novel she's mid-20s, or between 20 and 30 anyway. One day while she's working in the library, getting towards closing time, and the library closes at 9:30. I'm not sure why it closes that late. Maybe libraries in that area did close that late at that time, who knows. She finds a mysterious envelope during the day in the library, and she puts it aside at first, just thinking somebody left it there, somebody will come to claim it. So she doesn't think much of it during the day as the day gets busy. Later on, when it starts to quieten down, it's on her mind again, and she grabs it again, has another look and turns it over and finds her name printed on the front of the envelope. So immediately she's wondering, who left it here? Is it some crazy person? Is it an admirer? She has all these thoughts running through her head. And then the reader starts to get hooked at this stage as well, because it's a mystery, and I got hooked as well. And when she opens the envelope, she finds a note inside with just a short sentence that seems like a clue to something. And there's also a $50 note in the envelope. That's quite a good hook, because you're thinking, who's leaving this $50 and what's his clue for? Is it like a scavenger hunt, or is it some sort of game that she's about to embark on? And she decides to go ahead and solve the clue to find if there's another envelope. And while she does that, she runs into somebody else in the library who's just a patron, and he says he's forgotten about the time. He gets too engrossed in his book when he's reading, and he's forgotten that it's closing time. So they run into each other. She's a bit worried for about 5 seconds, it seems, then she seems okay with him. If that was me, I would be pretty suspicious of him the whole time. But then she lets him come along, and they find a book together where the clue is, and then they go from there. I found that part a little bit strange, even though this whole mystery about who is leaving these clues and who's leaving this money for her is really exciting and fun. The fact that she comes across a stranger in the library at the same time and immediately trusts him, I found that quite odd. Basically, the whole plot just goes from there. Brace, so I forgot to mention that the guy she runs into in the library is named Brace, which is just a strange name I found. I've never heard of the name Brace anywhere else. Maybe Brace is a popular name in the US, I'm not sure. Anyway, Brace and Jane decide to keep going with the clues, or Jane decides to, because it's her name on the envelopes. And each clue they solve brings them to another clue, and the money keeps doubling. So Jane gets hooked on the game. She wants to solve more clues, and she's also hooked on Brace a bit, and they have an instant connection, and then things start heating up with them as well. But with the clues, just the situations that she's driven to or forced into, they just get a little bit ridiculous and extreme. And I can't recall what I thought when I first read this, and I think when I read this the first time I was probably in my early 20s. I don't know what I thought back then about the situations she was led into, because they do get a bit ridiculous. But now, as I'm reading this novel, I just think, the author went too far with some of the things that happen to Jane in this novel and some of the situations she's in. The whole element about the solving the clues, solving the riddles, that's really interesting, because some of the clues are quite clever, but the fact that she's driven into more extreme and dangerous situations and she keeps going, that just seems really odd. And especially as the person who's leading her on this chase calls himself Master of Games, or Mog, he seems to also break into a house at times and leave things in the house or do things to her in the house, while she's asleep. I found that really strange that the character then, Jane, keeps going in the game without a second thought, it seems. For most of the novel, I just couldn't understand that part, and it made the plot seem a bit ridiculous and a bit unbelievable, to be honest. And I think that I'm quite glad that I decided that this would be the last time I read this novel. Well, of course, our main character is Jane Carey, the librarian. Look, at the start, she was a really good character, and the novel is in her point of view, basically. Well, it seems to be in her point of view for most of the time, and I just thought that her character was really good at the start, especially when she's unsure about the whole game and unsure about Brace. But then she seems to have almost a 180 turn, unsure about Brace for about 5 seconds, suddenly she's into him and wants to jump him all the time. Unsure about the game, but suddenly she seems like a mad woman. She just wants to be involved in the game all the time, no matter how dangerous or ridiculous situations she's been forced into. She seems just addicted to getting that money because the money keeps doubling each time she does something. I found that really strange for that character, because at the start of the book she's just a normal everyday person, a librarian, a little bit quiet. She wants a little bit of more excitement in her life, it seems, from what we read in the book, but I wouldn't have thought that she would have been hooked on something this dangerous from that character's point of view. The second character I want to discuss is Brace. His character is developed a bit better than Jane, I thought, because we're not really sure about Brace for some of this novel. We're not sure what his intentions are. Did he accidentally bump into Jane in the library, or is he secretly involved in this game? Is he working with the Master of Games, Mog, to encourage Jane to keep going in this dangerous game that she's in? We're not sure as a reader, and that was quite a good character development in this novel. So, top marks for that. I think Brace was probably a better character than Jane for me anyway in this novel. When I first read this novel many years ago, I can't recall everything I thought about it. I must have thought it was okay, because it's still on my shelf, or maybe I was just hoarding books at the time and decided to keep all of the Richard Laymon books I owned, no matter what I thought of them. The first 100 pages of this novel are really gripping. That hook is really good, and the game that Jane's involved in is exciting for about the first 100 pages or so, but then it goes into really crazy territory, and there are scenes that are just there for over-the-top effect, I think. Richard Laymon is known to write horror sometimes in a subgenre called splatterpunk, and this subgenre is known to have scenes of a certain nature just for effect. I don't really enjoy those scenes just because they're there. I think there's no need for horror to have scenes of certain nature just for the hell of it. If it's driving part of the plot, that's different. But if it's just there for the effect and nothing else, then I think they shouldn't be there. There's no need for it. And in this novel, there's quite a few scenes like that I don't think should be there. And the plot just derails a lot after those first 100 pages, and the ending is not really good. The ending is just a bit of a train wreck, to be honest, as well, in this novel. I rate this novel a 2.5 out of 5, just because of that great hook at the start and for the first 100 or so pages. This novel was a really good idea. I mean, the plot idea was really good and really exciting. The idea of getting mysterious clues and a mysterious game for a character to play, leading to some sort of scenarios that can be dangerous for the character, is an exciting novel to read in the horror genre if it's done properly. If it's done in a way where we don't have scenes that derail from the story and are just there for effect. Because of that, I just can't think the novel deserves more than 2.5 out of 5. I will be doing more reviews on Richard Laymon and other authors in the horror genre. If you don't want to miss out on those reviews, subscribe to my channel. Also, check out the playlist that's appearing on the screen now. You'll find more horror genre reviews in that playlist.